Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Post-fight review, Andy Ruiz Jr. and Luis Ortiz. This one taken by Andy Ruiz Jr. on the cards. It goes all 12 despite there being moments where it looked like Ortiz would be stopped. But Ortiz pushes through. Ruiz gets the decision, 113-112 and 114-111 on two scorecards. So unanimous decision win for Ruiz in a fight that was very tactical, very tight, but it was sprinkled with moments of excitement in between. So we'll go through a little bit of the action just to sort of sum it up, and then to a few thoughts, because Andy Ruiz Jr., Luis Ortiz, post-fight comments, Deontay Wilder jumps in the ring as well. And you have to ask the question about Ortiz. He's taken this loss here. Will he continue? So I guess we'll just sort of cut straight to the second round, because this is where it looked like the fight might end, because Luis Ortiz badly hurt by Andy Ruiz Jr. Big right hand to the side of the head, drops Ortiz. He goes down hard, and it had that look that, you know, he's really hurt. He may not beat the count, but he gets up. But it's clear he's on very unsteady legs, and Andy Ruiz Jr. comes in for the kill. Ortiz tries to sort of block some shots, tie up, and because he was just all over the place, he actually goes down. It really wasn't from the weight of the shots. He just didn't have his legs under him. So right off the bat, Luis Ortiz is, 2 knockdowns in that round. He's on the back foot. But actually, he has a decent round 3. He recovers, and this was the feature after the second knockdown later in the fight as well. Maybe Andy Ruiz Jr. had just thrown a little bit too much effort into round 2, but Ortiz actually has a decent round. But as I said, there was moments of excitement sprinkled with a tight tactical affair. So the sort of fight, for the most part, apart from the 2 knockdown rounds, we'll come to round 7 soon, effectively, you had Luis Ortiz doing what I think many of us expected he would do, use his advantages. Naturally, the taller man with the bigger reach, he stayed at range for the most part. He was working the jab. He was trying to effectively limit Andy Ruiz Jr.'s opportunities for counter shots. And it almost cost Ruiz Jr. in this fight. And it might sound weird, with Ortiz being dropped to the canvas 3 times, but he was at risk of being outboxed here, because there was a lot of rounds, and I'm not going to go round by round, but a lot of rounds where it was low volume. Ortiz was controlling the action, being the ring general. Ruiz sometimes not really doing a lot, and Ortiz, maybe nicking some of these rounds. There was 4 or 5 rounds that I thought in this fight were very close, very tight, very hard to score. And I knew that heading into the scorecards being read, that those cards had the potential to be all over the place. Very hard fight to score. And I've seen some people say that the cards were outrageous. It should have been wider for Ruiz. But I was expecting anything, because I thought that Andy Ruiz Jr. wasn't doing enough to take some rounds, that Luis Ortiz was pegging his way back into the fight. So those 2 knockdowns, the 2 rounds with the knockdowns, were vital in the end for Andy Ruiz Jr. Round 7, it was a similar sort of situation. Puts him down, big round for Andy Ruiz Jr. And then sort of round 8, Luis Ortiz has a good recovery round. And I sort of thought by about round 10 or so, well, if Ortiz can keep nicking some of these rounds and keep picking them up, could get a bit tasty on the scorecards. But actually, Andy Ruiz Jr. had a pretty good round 11, and I thought maybe that's enough, but it was hard to say. I thought Ortiz definitely won the last round. So I wasn't surprised by the scorecards 113, 112, 114, 111. So, if those knockdown rounds hadn't have happened, Luis Ortiz could have taken this fight. So Andy Ruiz Jr. almost let this one go because he didn't do enough work. But we kind of know what Andy Ruiz Jr. is, and he does. He's a front foot counterpuncher. He will come forward often, not throwing a lot, looking for the counters. And Ortiz did a lot of good work just to deny him the opportunities. Hence, sometimes, there were low volume rounds. There was boos from the crowd. Some of the action, it wasn't great. I don't think this one will go down as a classic, although Luis Ortiz described it afterwards as a war. But he was certainly looking a bit banged up by the end of it. But ultimately, Ortiz showed the heart of a warrior. You have to credit him. There's no quit in him, but I do think that he's certainly got durability issues now, and he was really trying to keep things at distance and stay out of harm's way for the most part in this fight. But Andy Ruiz Jr., when he did catch up with him, he was able to clip him and hurt him multiple occasions through the fight. There were a few moments where Ortiz did get a couple of clean lefts away, but ultimately, it never really caught fire in the way that maybe some people thought it would, or the fighters themselves described. It was a very tight tactical affair sprinkled with some action. I enjoyed it. I know it wouldn't have been for everyone, but sometimes, this just happens with a style matchup. I thought heading into this one, it could be very tight and cagey, and this is probably what we could see, because when you take those opportunities away from Ruiz, he doesn't really do a lot. He looks for those counters, and that's basically his strategy most of the time. But in terms of Luis Ortiz, he actually said to those who said King Kong is old that he gave you a war. And it really kind of wasn't that, and he was the one getting sort of pieced up in those rounds where he was dropped. And for the most part, he was pretty playing it safe too. He was the one actively trying to keep it at range, trying to walk Ruiz onto something, but you had a bit of a checkmate, stalemate situation. Both guys didn't want to sort of, Ruiz didn't want to bridge that gap to risk getting caught by a straight left. And Ortiz, he'd been hurt a few times early. He really did play the percentages. But he sort of brushed off the suggestion that he should retire, and he did say that he wanted a rematch. Unfortunately, he's not going to get one. And I guess for fans, the potential now that Ruiz has won for a fight with Deontay Wilder has increased tenfold. And Wilder actually jumped into the ring, and he sort of said he wants all sort of big fights, but he did say if this is what's in the cards, basically we can get it on. And I do think because it's an in-house fight for PBC, they'll make it for 2023. In terms of Andy Ruiz Jr., he did say it was difficult facing a southpaw, remembering he hadn't fought anyone of note at southpaw in his professional career, and especially in the last 10 years or so or whatever. Basically it's been lean pickings, so this was something different. He didn't look overawed, but he was the shorter man, and he found it hard to, for the most part, to bridge the gap, close the distance, get his work away. But both these guys were waiting for each other, and it never really caught fire apart from the two different rounds where Ortiz was hurt badly. But he did also say that he's sick of the inactivity. He wants to fight 3 or 4 times a year. Not sure that's going to happen. And that, God willing, he hopes that Wilder wins and that they get it on. I don't mind seeing that. I actually think that's a decent fight, and the biggest one within the PBC stable that can be made, and it should be easy to make should Deontay Wilder beat Robert Helenius in October. But credit to Ortiz, no quit in him. He came back, but I do think that, age has caught up with him. I do think there's durability issues now, and we saw it again. But I guess to sum up, you got to credit Ortiz, no quit in him. I don't think many of us expected it would go 12. Did Ortiz have the legs for 12? But Andy Ruiz Jr. kind of fought Luis Ortiz's fight for the most part. And that helped because his gas tank really wasn't tested, because Ruiz basically looking for counters, and that's basically it. So I'm not surprised that it was close in the end. I think Andy Ruiz Jr. did edge this one. He did enough with those knockdowns, and those knockdowns ultimately the difference. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.